Imagine this. The door closes. The voice that once filled the room, gone. Not with anger, not with violence, just absence. And in that absence, a silence louder than any scream. You stand in the stillness, looking at the empty chair, the half-drunk cup, the dent in the pillow beside yours. And suddenly, everything speaks. The silence, the objects, the air itself. Love has left the room, and you're no longer sure who you are without its gaze. But this moment, as brutal as it is also the beginning of something most people never dare to face. Because when love withdraws, it doesn't just leave you alone, it leaves you exposed. Exposed to yourself, to your longings, your pain, your forgotten truths. We like to think of love as safety, as comfort, as meaning, but sometimes love was the mask, and the silence it leaves behind is the mirror. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But when love is gone, avoidance is no longer an option. You sit with your soul whether you want to or not. And in that sacred discomfort, something begins to stir. What remains when love disappears? The shadow, the questions you've buried, the parts of you you only meet in the absence of distraction. When love walks out, truth walks in, not with fireworks, but in whispers. Not with beauty, but with brutal honesty. This isn't the end. This is the unveiling. So stay here with me, in this room, in this silence, because if you listen closely enough, you'll realize this is not emptiness. It's an invitation. And once you accept it, you'll never fear being alone again. We've been lied to, taught to fear loneliness like it's a disease, a symptom of failure, a sign that something's wrong with us. But what if loneliness isn't emptiness at all? What if it's space? A wide, raw, unfiltered space, where truth finally has room to speak? You're not broken because you're alone. You're just undistracted. There are no voices filling the gaps now. No one texting back. No one pulling your attention away from that quiet ache in your chest. And while the world tells you to rush out, to fix it, to fill the void, what if the void was the point? Carl Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that are important to you." And isn't that what real loneliness feels like? Not being without company, but being without connection to others, to truth, to yourself. But in the silence, when you stop performing, stop pleasing, stop hiding, you begin to connect with the one person you've avoided the longest. You. Loneliness becomes a crucible, a fire that burns away the masks, the stories, the noise. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's messy. But so is birth, so is becoming. The absence of love doesn't mean the absence of worth. It means the opportunity to redefine what love even means. And that can only happen in solitude, in that sacred pause between what was and what could be. So stop running from the quiet. Sit in it. Feel it. Let it show you who you are. Without applause, without approval, without anyone needing you to shrink. Loneliness is not a curse. It's a doorway. And you are the one with the key. Step through it and meet the part of yourself that was waiting for the silence all along. There's a moment in solitude when the silence stops feeling quiet and starts feeling haunted, not by ghosts, but by versions of you you've tried so hard to bury. That's the shadow, and it has been waiting for this. Carl Jung described the shadow as everything within us we don't want to see. The shame, the envy, the rage, the part of us that needed too much, or felt too small, or broke quietly when no one was watching. We wear masks to hide these pieces. We call it being strong, being good, being lovable. But when love disappears, so do the masks. And suddenly, there's nothing left between you and everything you've avoided. Loneliness doesn't create these wounds. It simply unmasks them. Without someone there to mirror back an identity, you begin to see the fractures in your own reflection, the need to be needed, the fear of abandonment, the desperate clinging to being enough. Love once distracted you from these truths. Now they stare back at you, naked and raw. And this is the sacred work: to sit in the room with your shadow and not flinch, to listen instead of judge, to feel instead of fix. Because that shadow isn't your enemy, it's your buried self. And until you welcome it, you'll keep searching for others to complete you, fix you, save you, but no one can integrate what you keep denying. So here in the silence, in the hurt, let the shadow speak. Let it show you your unmet needs, your forgotten wounds. Because the truth is, when love withdraws, your pain isn't the problem. Avoiding it is. This is not punishment. It's reflection, and the mirror doesn't lie. Let's be honest. A lot of what we call love isn't love at all. It's projection. It's our deepest unmet needs, our childhood wounds, our hidden longings, cast like shadows onto someone else, and called connection. Carl Jung warned that what we do not make conscious, we project onto others and call it fate. And nowhere is that more true than in romantic love. Think about it. That person you fell for, did they really see you, or did they reflect something you desperately wanted to believe about yourself? Safety, value, wholeness. We don't just love people. We love the feeling of being seen, validated, chosen, and too often we mistake emotional dependency for devotion. But when love withdraws, the illusion shatters. The one who made you feel whole is gone, and so the illusion of your own completeness crumbles with them. And what's left? You, your raw self, no longer propped up by someone else's presence, no longer lost in someone else's story. And here's the brutal gift: without the projection, you finally see who you are beneath it all. Not who they said you were, not who you became to be loved, but the real you, unfinished, flawed, and stunningly free. Love built on projection is fragile, because the moment the illusion breaks, so does the bond. But love, born after integration, after you've faced your shadow, after you've stopped expecting someone else to save you, that love isn't illusion. It's truth. So if the person you thought you couldn't live without is gone, don't chase them. Trace the projection back to yourself. That's where the real healing begins. Because what you're grieving may not just be the person, it may be the fantasy. And the only way to stop repeating it is to finally wake up. What if love leaving wasn't the end, but the beginning of something more honest? We're conditioned to see love's withdrawal as abandonment, a failure, a punishment. But what if it's none of those? What if it's an unveiling? When someone you love steps away, they don't just leave a space behind, they uncover it. And in that space things surface, things you've buried, ignored, or misnamed. The dependency you called loyalty, the denial you dressed as hope, the childhood wounds that shaped your patterns, and whispered lies into every adult bond. It all comes rising to the surface like a tide you can't stop. That's the moment it becomes clear. You were never just mourning a person. You were mourning the loss of what their presence protected you from seeing. Love, even the best kind, often becomes a curtain. A beautiful one, yes, but one that can block the view. And when it's pulled back, you see the room as it truly is. Your identity, your needs, your emotional architecture, all exposed. It's terrifying, and it's the beginning of healing. This is the paradox. The pain you're feeling is not the enemy. It's the teacher. Carl Jung knew that the journey to wholeness was through discomfort. Not around it. Not over it. Through. He called this the night sea journey. A descent into the underworld of the soul, where truth doesn't shout, but whispers from the wound. This isn't abandonment. It's a revelation. And if you have the courage to stay, to not rush to fill the space or numb the ache, you'll begin to see it. You were never left behind. You were led inward. There's a version of you that was created just to survive love. The one who became what was needed, who stayed quiet, stayed pretty, stayed agreeable, who kept the peace, carried the load, performed affection like it was an unpaid role in someone else's drama. And when love left, so did the stage. And with no one watching, the performance collapsed. That's when the ego begins to grieve, not just for the person lost, but for the identity that gave you value through them. The version of you that only existed in proximity to being wanted. But here's the secret. That identity was never truly you. It was armor. It was adaptation. And when it breaks, it hurts. Because even the masks we hate, we grow attached to. Carl Jung said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And sometimes it takes a loss that shakes the core to finally unmask one of those disguises. Without the validation of a partner, you begin to ask, who am I if I am not desired? What am I worth when no one's choosing me?" That collapse you're feeling, it's the false self dissolving. It's the letting go of the illusion that your worth is tied to someone else's affection. This is not the end. It's a funeral for what no longer serves you. And in that death, something new stirs. Not the girl who was loved for being agreeable, not the woman who shaped herself to fit, but you, unedited, unmasked, unapologetically whole. Grieve her the version of you that tried so hard to be loved. She did her best. But now, you're meeting someone more real. You. Let's say the truth out loud. Sometimes we miss what hurt us. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. Because the ache of being with them felt safer than the emptiness of being without them. That's not love. That's emotional addiction. Attachment can be intoxicating, especially when it's rooted in early wounds. When your nervous system learns chaos as connection, you start to crave the very thing that breaks you. And when that person leaves, you don't just go through heartbreak, you go through withdrawal. You shake, you ache, you question your sanity. Not because the love was pure, but because the bond was coded into your survival system. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spoke of repetition, compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate familiar pain in the hope that this time it'll end differently. That's how neurosis is born, not from weakness, but from the soul trying to resolve what the psyche never could. So when you're mourning a relationship, ask yourself, what am I really missing? The person? Or the pattern? The attention that followed emotional withdrawal? The illusion of safety wrapped in control? The scraps of love you convinced yourself were enough? Loneliness, in this context, is not just about being without them. It's about being without the cycle. And that's where the true discomfort lives. You're detoxing from the identity you played in that pattern. You're sitting in the silence that your pain used to fill. And it's hard, because healing requires you to break the bond, not just with the person, but with the part of you that believed pain was love. But once the addiction breaks, you start to feel something else. Stillness, peace, truth. Not the highs and lows of emotional chaos, but the quiet pulse of inner safety. And that is where freedom begins. There's a difference between being alone and being cut off. One is chosen, the other is suffered. Most people confuse solitude with isolation, but solitude is sacred. It's not emptiness. It's presence without distraction. It's connection, not to others, but to yourself. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, the journey to becoming whole, can only begin in solitude. Why? Because it's in that space, free from noise, that your soul finally has room to speak. In the world, you perform. You explain, please, adjust. But in solitude, you're no longer required to be digestible. There, your real self rises. Not the daughter, not the lover, not the friend. Just you. Without the roles, without the mirrors, without the masks. And yes, It feels lonely at first. But it's not because you're missing others. It's because you're just now meeting yourself. Isolation is what happens when we're disconnected from everything. Solitude is what happens when we reconnect from the inside out. It's the beginning of remembering what you want, what you feel, what you need. You sit in the silence, and instead of it swallowing you, you begin to hear your own rhythm, your own breath, your own wisdom, and that's when the shift happens. You no longer need someone else to reflect your worth. You no longer need the noise to feel alive. You become your own mirror, your own anchor, your own home. Solitude is not a punishment. It's a return to the you that never needed to beg for love to feel whole. There comes a point in the silence when everything breaks. The tears you held back for years, the strength you wore like armor, the stories you clung to so tightly they became your skin. It all cracks. And that moment, the one that feels like you're falling apart, is actually the beginning. This is what Jung referred to, in symbolic language, as nigredo, the blackening, the dark night of the soul. Not darkness as in evil, but darkness as in depth, a sacred disintegration. You think something's gone wrong, that you're regressing, that your heart is failing you. But this is not failure. This is the cleansing fire of transformation. Grief isn't just sadness. It's the soul's way of clearing space for something truer to grow. We mourn not just the person who left, but the illusion that love could save us from ourselves. We mourn who we were in their presence, and we mourn the comfort of not knowing who we really are. But once the collapse begins, you can't go back. The mask doesn't fit anymore. The roles feel hollow. The pretending ends. And yes, it hurts. Like fire through the bones. Like the earth has fallen out from beneath you. But let it burn. Let the breakdown happen. Let yourself unravel. Because beneath the rubble is a self you've never truly met. A self that no longer needs to be held together by someone else's hands. Jung believed that the path to wholeness always begins in the underworld. And this heartbreak, this grief, this disorientation is your descent. Not to be lost in the dark, but to find the parts of you that only survive in shadow. This is your nigredo. And if you allow it, it will not destroy you. It will remake you. There's a quiet power that only comes from pain. The kind that doesn't just mark you, it opens you, breaks you just enough to let the light in. Carl Jung called it the wounded healer, the archetype of the one who transforms their own suffering into wisdom, empathy, and depth. Not by denying the wound, but by walking through it and choosing to stay awake. You don't become a healer by never being broken. You become one because you were, because you know what darkness feels like, because you've sat in the silence, not as punishment, but as initiation. Loneliness does that. It strips away your defenses, your attachments, your illusions. It introduces you to pain without anesthesia and asks, what now? And the answer, over time, becomes purpose, not in the grand, loud, performative sense, but in the soft revolution of presence. You start seeing others differently, not through judgment, but through recognition. Their wounds are not foreign. Their pain no longer scares you, because you've met your own in the dark of your own silence, and so your presence begins to heal, not because you have all the answers, but because you're no longer afraid of the questions. This is what loneliness reveals, that your pain has a place, that your suffering wasn't wasted, that you are not broken beyond repair. You are broken into repair. Every tear, every ache, every quiet night you thought you'd never survive, has made you a well, deep enough to hold others without drowning in them. You become the one who can sit with sorrow, hold discomfort, and not look away. That's the wounded healer, not a role you choose, but a truth that chooses you. Once you've walked through the fire and found yourself still standing, here's the truth we often avoid. What breaks in love was already cracked in childhood. That ache you feel in the silence, it's not just from their absence. It's the echo of an earlier abandonment, a wound that predates romance, one that whispered, "You're too much," or "You're not enough." Loneliness has a way of stripping everything down, until only the rawest part of you remains, the child, the one who wasn't held enough, or heard enough, or allowed to just be without performing. And now, in this quiet, she returns, not to haunt you, but to be seen. Carl Jung said that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. But here's the miracle. In this stillness, you get the chance to become the parent you needed. You begin the sacred work of reparenting, not with judgment, but with compassion. You soothe your own fear. You speak the words no one ever said. "I'm here. You're safe. You are worthy, even when no one is watching." This is emotional maturity. Not perfection, but presence. Not the absence of pain, but the willingness to hold it with tenderness. The wounds that surface in heartbreak are not regressions. They're invitations to stop outsourcing your safety, to stop begging for love that mirrors what was missing. You are not too damaged to heal. You are just becoming whole. And as you learn to nurture that inner child, you stop waiting for others to do it. You stop chasing caretakers in lovers' clothing. You become the one you were always searching for. This right here is the turning point. Not just surviving loneliness, but transforming through it. When we fall in love, we give pieces of ourselves away. Sometimes gently, sometimes without even knowing it. A dream placed on hold. A truth left unspoken. A wildness dimmed so someone else could feel comfortable. And over time, we begin to disappear in our own story. But when solitude arrives, when the noise fades and the role dissolves, those lost parts begin to whisper. The part of you that used to write, that danced in the kitchen with no one watching, that said no without guilt, that wanted big things before someone taught you to settle. These aren't random impulses. They're breadcrumbs back to your wholeness. Carl Jung believed the soul doesn't just evolve forward, it also calls backward to the forgotten, the repressed, the abandoned within. This is soul retrieval. Not some mystical ritual, but a profoundly human act, to remember what you gave up in order to be loved, and to take it back, not with bitterness, but with reverence. You start to listen to yourself again, to trust the knowing that once got silenced by someone else's needs, the you that shrunk to keep peace, the you that dimmed so others could shine, the you that stopped dreaming because it made them uncomfortable. In solitude, those voices return, not as noise, but as music. You are not broken. You are buried. And now you are unearthing yourself. Piece by piece, breath by breath, truth by truth, not to become someone new, but to return to who you were before the world told you to forget. This is not loneliness. This is a homecoming. Something changes when you walk through the fire of loneliness and come out the other side. You no longer crave love the way you used to, as oxygen, as validation, as rescue. You crave it as truth, as communion, as something sacred, not something that stitches your broken parts together. Because now you know you were never broken. You were fragmented, and those fragments, you've gathered them in the silence. This is what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself, not by becoming perfect, but by integrating everything you are, the light and the shadow, the fear and the strength, the need and the self-sufficiency. And when you become whole, love shifts. It stops being a lifeline. It becomes a choice. No longer driven by desperation. Don't leave me. Please stay. make me feel enough, but rather by alignment. Do we grow in the same direction? Can we hold space for each other's truths? Does your presence feel like peace, not performance? This is love without need. Not because you're cold, but because you're full. It doesn't mean you won't want closeness. It means you won't collapse to get it. You can love now with open hands, not clenched fists. You can leave the door unlocked, not because you expect someone to fill the space, but because you're okay if they don't. You don't need love to make you feel complete. You are complete. And from that place, real love begins, not built on dependency, but on presence. Love, now, is not a place to hide. It's a place to be seen. If love returns now, and it might, it won't find the same person it left. Because now, you don't need saving. There is no longer a hole you're begging someone to fill. There's just space open, intentional, sovereign, and you will only welcome what honors that. This is not a fairy tale ending. This is something better. A quiet power. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind that says, I know who I am, and I know what I will no longer allow. You no longer seek love like a child looking for shelter. You seek it like a soul looking for resonance. No masks, no roles, no rehearsed affection. And if love does come, it will come different too. Because it has to meet you where you are now. It has to speak your language. Truth, depth, respect. It has to know how to sit in silence without needing to fill it. How to be present without trying to fix or possess. And if it can't do that, you won't beg, you won't bargain. You'll let it go. Because peace is no longer negotiable. You've learned the cost of self-abandonment. You've paid it in full. And now, love must arrive through the front door, invited, not rescued. You're not bitter. You're clear. You're not guarded. You're grounded. What a thing it is to return to the world. Without armor, without desperation, with only your truth in hand. This is you now. Stronger, clearer, free. So here we are, at the end of what was never really about heartbreak, but about awakening. When love withdrew, it didn't leave you hollow. It left you honest, face to face with everything you tried not to see. Your fears, your attachments, your longing to be chosen. But it also left behind something else. Room, space to breathe, a sacred pause where masks fall and truth rises. You thought you needed them to feel whole, but look at you now, still standing, more grounded, more real. What you've walked through wasn't just grief, it was a return, a remembrance. You didn't just lose someone, you found someone. You. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that's exactly what this silence gave you. Not a punishment, a privilege. Not exile, initiation. Loneliness became the fire that burned off everything false. It taught you how to hold your own hand, to stop performing, to stop shrinking, to speak your needs, to see your worth even when no one else was there to reflect it back. You learned to love without losing yourself. You learned to stay, even when it hurt. And now, you walk through the world, not as someone waiting to be filled, but as someone who knows how to overflow. So take a moment. Let that truth settle into your bones. You are not who you were when this began. You are softer and stronger. You are clear. And if love comes again, it will not complete you. It will simply meet you. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever found truth through loneliness? What did it show you? What did it help you release? What part of yourself did you finally meet? Leave your story in the comments. Not just for you, but for someone else, who may be standing where you once stood. Because if loneliness has a gift, it's this. It leads us not away from love, but into the kind that finally includes ourselves. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being you. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even more shocking.